Welcome to the CEO and the Salesman Podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Whyatt. I'm the salesman part of the title. Each week, I sit down with CEOs and entrepreneurs to discuss and dissect their journeys, filled with triumphs, challenges, and some good old-fashioned business wisdom. Get ready to laugh, learn, and be inspired as we dig into leadership, strategy, sales, marketing, and everything in between. This is the CEO and the Salesman Podcast. Let's get on with the show. Hi, and welcome to the CEO and the Salesman Podcast, where we talk to business leaders from Australia and around the world about their experiences and how their career has made a real impact. So today we've got Frank. Frank, thank you very much for joining me today.
Anytime, Matthew. Good to catch up, mate.
Yeah, great to catch up as well. Hey, Frank. So Frank's from 8 Squad, by the way. And so what we're trying to do, mate, is I really just want to interview you, ask you a couple of questions about your career. And really, our audience are software and technology leaders. And I want to really unpack some of the ideas, thoughts, and general, lessons that you might want to teach to somebody who wants to grow their business and become a successful CEO. So, Frank, can I start? And I noticed, and of course I know from your career that you've worked in some of the world's biggest companies all the way through to running your own. So what lessons, if there are any, that you've taken from your days with Oracle and IBM through to your own business?
It's easy to criticize the big guys, right? But there are things that they do very well. And, I think the one thing that I learned is, really bringing the structure and discipline to the business that typically frustrates you when you're in the big guys. But you realize, especially for scaling a company, that without it, right, it's a recipe for disaster, right? And I like to think of it as the Goldilocks principle. What's just enough? And, like any healthy system, right? If too much chaos has no direction, not good. Too much order clamps and cramps creativity, right? But there's a healthy center point where you've got just enough process design and rules and regulations to really set you free to be creative, right? But enough to give direction. And that's, as the business grows, those boundaries change and shift, and it's actually not a fixed point, right? But I think that's what I did learn from the big guys is, there is a need, right, for structure in order to really run and scale a business.
Okay, so is there any specifics that you can think of at the moment that, and I guess, your business is very different to where you are today versus where you started, and what systems or what thoughts about systems, process, procedure did you have early days versus now, and how those two things join up?
Yeah, look, one of the first ones I think is, and I guess it's also because of my vocation. I grew up in the sales vocation, right? And so when I look at a lot of, especially in the kind of business segment, in the services space, right? A lot of founders don't have the discipline and structure in a sales process, and that can be a real pitfall because you essentially can't predict future revenue. It's very hard, right? And you're going great because you've won some big contracts, and then when they come to an end, you fall off a cliff because you don't have a robust pipeline of business, right? And it's very hard to scale sustainably, right?
Yep.
Without a really good sales process, and that's probably the first. Like I usually start there, right?
Mate, I absolutely love that. I'm a, as the podcast name alludes to, I'm a salesperson. I've been a salesperson all my life, and this is you're singing to the choir here. This is what I talk about all the time, so I'm loving it. So when you talk about discipline and structure, yeah. So keep going on that, please.
Yeah, it is. It is like really understanding the metrics of your sales funnel, right? So, if you're a business and you want to generate so much revenue per month, right? If your product is people, right, then what is your capacity? Therefore, how much do you have to close to keep capacity going? And when do you need to close the next round of deals to keep that capacity flowing, right? And not understanding that can be a real peril, especially for a lot of young upstarts who they start up because they win a few anchor clients, and they're busy just delivering really what they should do, deliver value, right? But, they're not prepared for then, okay, what happens when those clients, the natural ending of those relationships comes and you got to get your next client, right? And if you want to grow, you've got to understand that means you have to grow everything at the front end of your funnel, right? Because, keeping 5 mouths to feed is different to keeping 10 to 20 to 50 to 100, right? And so
Indeed.
really understanding, all right, how much do we need in just at the very top end of the funnel? What are the translation metrics to actually customers that are then qualified that we're in a bid process with? How many of those do I close on average that leads me down into, this end of my funnel? And really understanding that, and then understanding, and this is where a lot of people get to the point where, oh yeah, I get that, Frank. I get my ratios in my linear funnel, but okay, hold on. Now we're starting to scale our sales organization. So if I go to 2 salespeople or 3 salespeople or 10 salespeople, right? And I say, how do you qualify a deal? Am I going to get the same answer of the whole 10? If I say, how do you qualify your position in the deal? Am I going to get the same answer from the same 10? And so the art and science of how you sell has to be a discipline that is repeatable and consistent, right? And so how you onboard your salespeople, how you bake in the sales discipline into their everyday behavior, so you get a consistent, I don't care if you use TAS or BRIC or MEDIC or whatever methodology you choose, but pick one and embed the behavior into everything that you do operationally. It should be baked into your systems. It should be baked into how you run your review processes, your sales meetings, and all that kind of stuff. And you often find that that's where the first mistake goes, because a lot of those things are disintegrated, and this sales guy's a star performer. He comes over, he uses he or she uses their own, version of a sales method. You don't trust them because they're winning, right? They're doing. You go, okay, great. They're closing deals. I'm not gonna break it, but it doesn't work. It doesn't scale. So, yeah.
So often I've had conversations with business owners, and they've talked about natural talent and natural ability when it comes to sales, and I've tried to provide them the structure to say, well, take the natural and then find a way to replicate it, and then knowing that, and nobody wants to talk about scripts. Nobody wants to really talk about process. Nobody wants to talk about templates, because sales is these salespeople are like, sales is, I often have said, sales is like acting for ugly people. I want to be a performer. I want to be the star of the show. I'm the superstar in the whole process.
Yeah.
But then I have to remind them that nobody won an Oscar without a script, and the only reason that some people sort of suck when they go through a script is because they haven't practiced it and haven't used it well enough. So what is your how do you feel about the scripts and the whole natural salesperson process or phenomenon?
Yeah, I don't believe there's such thing as a natural salesperson. And I don't think it's a one size fits all, but the approach has to be the same. The science has to be the same. The process has to be the same, and so, I don't care if you're successful at using this method or that method. As this business, you need to conform to this method, because it's the only way I can get a consistent conversation across. When I ask you, is this there? I know that you say it's there because you've used the same testing principles that we conform to, right? Not something else. And so, yeah, I think there definitely has to be, and even we find, we're constantly reviewing how do we improve each stage of the process. Like, the other mistake is thinking, I just want to grow my sales, just go hire a salesperson. Well, hold on, what type of salesperson you're hiring? Because deal origination, the nature of how deals are originated today is very different, right? With the influence of digital, very informed buyers. and that also is different by the type of product that you sell. And so you might need a different team who do origination to a team who manage the commercial transaction to the team that deliver the product, right? And, you know, you need to think about that full life cycle of really of origination to cash, you know, like how do we find the deal to how do we start invoicing for the product? And you actually have to really dissect every step of that process and what type of people you need across the life cycle of that turns into repeat business. And that's...
Mate, that's fantastic. That's a great way of thinking about it. And, you know, because if you think about everything as a funnel, you know, getting to that sales point, prospects are way more informed and they expect to be way more informed today. When I first started 25 years ago, we were putting adverts in the newspaper. People would phone the 1-800 number and we would just call them back. And they didn't know who we were, and people had a level of trust and a level of expectation the person who were calling them was being truthful, and so that then we would just, you know, we'd obviously send them brochures and send them information, but they couldn't do any research. They could read the brochure, and then we just have to call them and ask for the money. And sure, it was a lot easier, but really the prospects were, and as my business matured, I had to figure out ways of actually qualifying people out to make sure that we got good quality customers in, because it was, I won't say too easy because nobody's going to be as silly to say that, but it was certainly a lot easier back in the day, 20 years ago, to make a sale than it is today. Because, you know, if somebody wants to look me up, look you up, look anybody up, they not only are going to expect to see, you know, a well-created website, great information, informal stuff like these types of conversations, magazine articles, video, all of this stuff. They're going to. I think the current number is something like you've got to have 10 hours of content about yourself out there, and that is just so opposite to how most software and technology people think. Is they go, well, I'm just going to build the next feature because that feature is going to be the win, and it's just what I found is just not the case, right?
No, mate. And yeah, it is getting harder. Buyers are becoming more sophisticated, selling organizations. So, you know, you see this, right? All of a sudden there's a new best practice on how to position content, and there's 50 ads on LinkedIn or 50 ads on Insta on, you know, let me show you how to do it. And then all of a sudden, like I see it, right? I must get 50 LinkedIn, you know, outreaches a week. And they all follow the same scripts, the same the same bullshit. And often they're not even Australian resident, right? And that's my first litmus test. If they're not, I just delete, right?
Yep.
I don't know how many things I get from offshore value propositions. You know, we can help you reduce costs. Delete. You know, and so they've spent no
time qualifying you. They've spent no time understanding your business. You can almost see the gaps in the email and the messages where they've got a variable. Hi, we help, you know, insert type of business. You know, it's so poorly done.
Even to the point where the perceived "I know you" line. Oh, Frank, I came across your profile on LinkedIn. Blah, and even that. Like those first two are the same. You know what I mean? Yep. No, you haven't come across anything. You know what I mean? Like you haven't done anything. And I see that, I hit delete. And so what happens is the buyer becomes even more hyper skeptical today, right?
Yes.
So the noise meter is so high that in the first three words, like if you sound like I'm just going delete, you know, and so it's hard, right? It is actually, if you're a seller in modern day, like it's a lot more complicated because there's so much noise. Digital has proliferated that noise at real time. And we're trying to break through that noise to become a signal so that our buyer actually receives the signal. And that's a whole new problem and a whole new challenge. And so, and you can't automate that. I hate this whole, let's just automate that to a degree, you know what I mean? And So yeah, the art of selling, it comes back down to, you know, at some point a human has to have a conversation with another human being, and that is the point of truth, right? And if you've got the wrong humans having the wrong conversation at that point of truth, you're going to lose, and you're gonna you know, do your cash.
Yeah, every now and then I get a message, and I don't know if you remember that movie, The Boiler Room, from a long, long
Yeah,
time ago, and the guy gets the phone call in the kitchen and said, "You've been phoning me every weekend trying to sell me the newspaper. That's a terrible sales pitch." And it coaches him how to do a sales pitch. And so every now and then I get a message on LinkedIn or an email, and I read it and go, and I respond. I go, "Hey, this is how this email should look. This is how this communication should look." I actually did that on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago, and I said, "Hey, you've not spent any time qualifying me. You've not spent any time creating a relationship. In the industry, we call this a pitch slap, where you've just, I've just accepted your connection, and now I get a long list of why I'm the greatest." Actually, one person, the one that I actually responded to specifically, said, "People are getting rich using crypto. Join my webinar." And with a bit.ly URL, like, everything about this screams scam. And I went back to him and said, "Mate, I don't know, and I don't know you, but everything about this message screams scam. If you're having any intention of getting any cut through, you might want to have a look at how you can relate to me as a human." And the person came back absolutely furious that I thought it was an awful message. He goes, "Oh, this is the best practice with all the best YouTubers in the world."
Yeah.
What? And I went back and said, "Okay, so this is the message." I actually went back and I sent him a really long email giving him, like, I get paid hundreds of dollars an hour to do coaching for people, and just this guy caught me at the time, and I wrote, "This is how you should be communicating." No response. Not interested at all.
Yeah.
So,
and look, I even think of the consumer-based products that I've bought recently, right? And I buy them because of some human element. So I look at all the supplements I take, or not all. I mean, I'm selective, but any kind of product I buy, and I know I've probably paid more for that product than an equivalent product, but I've done it because it came through so I listened to a podcast. I heard someone talking about, in long form, not some short form bullshit ad, right? But a trusted source talking about something in depth and spoke about the product, and I just go, "I'm buying that product." I don't even question, And so, that brand could never have got that cut through as much.
Not with an ad.
No, not with an ad. Absolutely.
No. So are you on the M&M? Are you on the resveratrol and M&M? No.
I have done NAD infusions in the past, and I know NMM,
right.
But no, I don't do that.
Right. Yeah. I've obviously been targeted. My age and interest group, I've got targeted. Did exactly that. I watched I think it was Huberman or one of those guys talking about all the benefits. So I went, you know what? Fine. Went and found it, and I still didn't buy it until a friend, and I thought about it in sales, and then a mate of mine says, "Oh, I'm on it, and it's good."
Yeah.
And I went, "Okay, cool. Give me that company. I'll buy the pack. Join the subscription." I just saw the money come out of my account 2 days ago for the second month.
But that's it, right? And it's great, and like it clearly the problem that it spoke to is something you relate to, and it's a no-brainer, right? And it came from a trusted source, and in the consumer market, that is the new selling way. But how do you create those moments of truth where customers can connect with your product? Now, in the enterprise space, it's very different, and in the enterprise space, it's a really complex matrix of points of influence that you've got to be there to meet the customer where they're at in the buying cycle, and we know, right, the challenge is, as a seller, you want to move up the process to when the customer knows they've got a problem but doesn't necessarily know how they have to fix the problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because by the time they get down to the buying stage, it's a commodity buy at that point.
It's a bake-off, right? Yep.
It's a bake-off, and whether they buy the wrong or right thing, or the right or wrong partner, it's a commodity-driven acquisition, right? It's going to come about price. You can move up this stack; it becomes about value, right? And we need to move. I like how my AI picks up these things.
That's right. I just saw that too. That was pretty cool.
We need. I
wonder if I can do that.
Yeah,
no.
I think
I'm on a PC. You're on a Mac. There you go. Once again, the Macs have defeated us PC users.
So, if we move up the stack, it's a conversation around value where you can build trust. And so,
Yep.
but then to convince someone to invest time with you, right, at that point, right, it's hard. And so what channels do we have? And you realize it comes a lot. It's about relationship, whether it's someone they had a relationship with who has a relationship with you or other. It's proof points. It's battle scars.
Yep.
These things that earn you the right into the conversation, and that's
absolutely.
Yeah.
So you're so right. I often, so people say, "Oh, we're a B2B seller or a B2C seller." I said, "Well, look, you know what? If you thought about it, the fact that you're H to H, because there's a human that you're going to talk to, buildings and companies, and they don't buy products. I've never sold to a company. I've sold to a person inside that company, other people, because people make up the organization. At 5 o'clock in most of the city, maybe 6 o'clock in most cities around the world, the whole business walks out the door. The business is not the assets; it's the people. So when it comes to you've spoken a lot about discipline, you're talking a lot about structure, and we've connected in our first conversation about martial arts. And both of us, I did it for 15 years. You've done it for 25, is it?
Yeah, just going on probably almost 30 years now.
Right.
More. I was 13. I'm now 52. So there you go.
There you go. Let's not do the math. Let's not do the math. So is it is it a chicken and maybe it's a chicken and the egg thing? If you started so early, you've got discipline and structure baked in early, or do you think how are those two things interplayed when it comes to business and recreation?
Man, I don't distinguish the difference, to be honest.
No.
For me, it's been a way of life, and therefore a way of business. The kind of things go hand in hand. And while it's interesting, because in some places I'm very, very undisciplined and unstructured. Like if I look at and what I mean by that is this: I'm very informal with my style of leadership, my style of communication, my style of selling, right? But when it comes to how I think about strategy and selling, I'm very structured, very disciplined, right?
Right.
I had to learn how to apply that down the operational stack. So my background's always been, if you think about the business, right, you've got the front of house and then the back of house, right?
Yep.
I've always been front of house. But when you become a CEO or when you found a business, you get thrown into your back of house whether you like it or not. And I went screaming, because it wasn't natural for me, right? But you have to, whether you like it or not, apply that same rigor and discipline all the way through, even if you're not good at it, right? I subscribe to get people who are better than you at things and just listen to them, right? But you still have to know enough to be able to make an executive decision when executive decisions need to be made, right? So, for I guess anyone starting and scaling a business, depending on which side, like you could be on the back of house op side, well, you're going to have to deal with the front of house stuff you don't like, right? And vice versa. You could come from a more sales marketing background, and you'll forget your back of house. That'll be to your peril, because that delivers the value of your product, and you got to understand it. You got to apply the same rigor and discipline, or have people that you trust that can hold you accountable, right? And so,
I had a person who explained to me back a long time ago that I might think about a wheel of capability in sales and marketing. I might be strong in sales and slightly weaker on marketing. Yeah. People, I might not. Other than salespeople, I don't really know how to talk to those people because. Various levels of motivation and inspiration or threats and intimidation in various stages along the path. Well, I've got terrible timing every time I try to do any type of trading or buying and selling of things. I got caught up in the NFT thing a couple of years ago, and I got some really expensive cartoon pictures if anybody wants them. But what the person said is every time you go around the cycle, think of a spring, and as you go around the cycle, you might not necessarily be good at accounting, but when you go around the cycle again, you're slightly better because you've traveled up the spring. So as you keep going, whilst your weaknesses are still weak and your strengths are getting better, everything's rising with experience and exposure and conversations like this. So that's how I think about those weaknesses. So when you're thinking about back of office, mate, what are the structures and disciplines you've put in place there? Because we've talked about a lot of the front of the office when it comes to sales and marketing and client acquisition. Have you taken any of that discipline and structure and placed it inside the delivery mechanism?
Yeah, definitely. And we're constantly evolving. So, to zoom out a bit, right? When we look at everything through kind of a systems lens, right? And when I say a system is systems are dependent and interdependent, right? Independent and interdependent, right? And so, sales can be independent of delivery, but it's also interdependent, because if delivery don't deliver value, it's going to be harder to sell that product or to that customer again in future, right? So there's a feedback loop, yeah. And so we did look at, okay, what's going to, again, same thing, exact same problem. You hire delivery people, right? You hire them for their experience, but your corporate asset, your corporate value, IP value proposition is about you. Like for us, it's about, we take a human-centered lens. What does that even mean?
Yep.
How does that get manifested into every interaction that every single human has with every one of our customers? How do we codify that? How do we onboard our people into that experience and essentially align them to a delivery framework that, again, for our delivery organization is as consistent as what the sales process would be in our sales organization, right?
So are you saying you're always, so whilst you're strong in sales, you want to see if you can find those same levels of discipline and structure in the back end, because if it's unbalanced, you've got a wobbly bike and we fall off them.
Correct. And then we look at, from an operational perspective, right? Okay, once a sale is closed, how do we predict revenue? So right from the front of pipeline, right through to sending an invoice, right? What are the systems that support that end-to-end process? And we've got that down to a really nice fine art, right? So from a revenue forecasting perspective, we've got really good insight 1 month to 3 months out, on where our revenue trajectory looks like based on the quality and shape of the pipeline, right? And correlated against people, projects, skills, etc. And we're constantly refining that, you know what I mean? But we're a 4.5-year-old business, right? And so these things became bigger problems as you started to scale kind of north of 50, delivery resources, right? And when you're smaller, you can kind of rely on the smarts of your people, right? But
yep, absolutely.
You can't do that for long. So
just by scaling, do you find that did you find that you had to dumb it down a bit as you grew, like make it more simple?
Depends what you mean, right? So if anything, we've become a lot more sophisticated, right? But everything we do, we try simplify the principle. You know what I mean? Like you've got to make learning a discipline in the business, and we've got some really kind of complex frameworks around learning, right? Again, we come back to our systems model. We have an adaptive human model, which is about how we keep people in a state of growth, right? And that's personal growth.
How do you do that?
Sorry?
Yeah. Tell me, how do you do that?
Yeah, so this was a framework that I came up when I took my little deviation from the tech industry and I went to health, and I was essentially rehabilitating people who were far down the spectrum of broken, right? They had they had autoimmune dysfunctions, PTSD, brain injury, and we were rehabilitating them back to being functional, to cope with the environmental needs, right? To live a normal life. And what we found is the principles and science to get people back along that path fast. And you understand the kind of people we were dealing with were people who have done almost every other therapy and it hasn't worked, or it's worked to a degree and hit a wall, right? A good example would be one case study which comes to mind, where a young Lebanese boy got hit by a car when he was 20 years old, was left in a coma for 3 months, was left for dead, came out of his coma, rehabilitated his speech, but was still wheelchair bound. He was part of the best hospital in Beirut, in Lebanon. The doctors, he had some of the best doctors in the world tied to the university, the American University of Beirut. And they said, you know, you're going to be wheelchair bound. This is your life. Occupational therapy was about coping in a wheelchair, right?
Right.
Now,
not getting better, just dealing.
Right. And if it wasn't for he's just a stubborn young guy who said that's not good enough, he sourced us. He came and lived in Australia for 2 months. He was actually an Australian citizen, but who'd moved back to Lebanon when he was young with his family.
Right.
So he still had an auntie in Bankstown. At the end of his 2-month rehabilitation program with us, he took his first unassisted steps for 20 meters. Roll the clock forward now, 5 years down the track. Forget about 5 years. 2 years in, he walked his first unassisted marathon. He's now living in Australia, studying at our universities, living on his own. May I just make that point, because he needed a full-time carer when he was with us. Living on his own, no wheelchair, doing CrossFit, living a normal life, right? And this is a guy that was told he'd never walk again, right? So, what
did you do for him? Was it mindset stuff, or
No.
what was it?
You can't fix this with mindset, right? He had the mindset. He had the mindset of growth, right?
Right. He showed up with that. So was it innovative practices?
Yeah, it essentially was rewiring his nervous system to find alternate pathways to the ones that were damaged. That was it, right?
Wow.
Now, if I just deconstruct that for a second, yeah? And a healthy human being, yeah, when we are under stress and duress, yeah, we will default neurologically to the pathways that are most energy conservative, because your body always wants to have, energy in the tank to deal with a threat. Yeah?
Yes.
So the more stressed you become, the more you will default to the things that are easy for you to do, not the things that are right. Yeah? And his body was just an extreme version of that, right? Like he'd lost function. And so energy conservation would mean don't try get up and walk. Like you are going to lose your balance. You're going to fall down, right? And unless you can find a new neural pathway, your pathway is enforcing being wheelchair bound. That's your reality, right? And
sure.
In life, same. Not to that clinical degree, but we will default to our worst self when under pressure most of the time. Unless you make a decision to put effort into growth pathways that alter your behavior, right? Because even when you have new knowledge, this is what I hate about, the way most companies go about learning and development, right? Most learning and development initiatives are about giving people knowledge, yeah? Not about mastering that knowledge. It's actually not even knowledge. Let me say, it's giving them information and then certifying that they have understood the information, yeah? It's got nothing to do with the applied wisdom of that information. And so our whole adaptive human model is about constantly pressure testing our people's ability, understanding what is the core domain of performance erosion. Is it just a physical thing? I'm physically just stressed out. I don't have the physical practices of rest and recuperation and repair that allows me to cope with the pressures of the world, and therefore I'm falling off the cliff. Could be as easy as that. Could be I'm lacking in some knowledge. Yes, I've done I've ticked the box for the information, but actually I really don't know how to apply that information, right?
And so do people apply that through so it's the repetition you think that is and that training piece.
And I'll come back to the dojo, to the old martial arts analogy there, right? So is it that? And we go, okay, if it's that, we know what to do with that. And there's an intrinsic link between actually embedding something up here and your embodied state, because there's no learning that happens when you're not physically resourced for learning, right? Then there's a system of belief. Now, this is the most incessant system because this is the most dangerous, right? Let's look at a non-performing salesperson, yeah? Non-performing salesperson could have been your best salesperson 2 quarters ago, but now they're in Skidsville. And when you talk to that person, what you hear is the stories. I've got a bad patch. My team are letting me down, blah, blah, blah. It's everyone else's fault, not mine, right? And by the way, there could be some truth in a lot of that, right?
Yep.
But the way they're then showing up to the situation is they become either a victim or a persecutor of the people around them, right? Because they are in a helpless state. Now, no matter what knowledge they have, or how physically resourced they are, if they believe the world is shit, then that's how they're going to engage with everyone around them. And if you can't break that belief, it doesn't matter what you do. They're going to continue on a trajectory of failure. Normally, they end up on a pip and they leave. And to be honest, you lost a very capable person, right?
So how do you break that belief?
So we have a whole framework around the deep interventions that go into any one of those systems, because those systems, again, they're independent systems, but they're also interdependent. They feed forward into each other and feed back into each other. And so when we look at an individual and an erosion of performance, we look at it holistically in that manner. And so that's something that, come back to martial arts, what I did learn is, I could give you links to the best. I'll pick Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because that's my current, pursuits, right?
Yep.
I could give you John Danaher's full curriculum, one of the best trainers in the world, right? And you're going to learn a lot. Yeah, and you might watch those videos a lot and have them committed to memory, and you can tell me all about the lessons. But when I put you on a mat with another guy, he's going to kick your butt, right? Because all you have is information at that point. You have no knowledge. And so from an ADCAR perspective, if you look at change management, we've got awareness, yeah? I might have the desire, all right, to change, but unless now I go and take action and have reinforcement loops on how I apply that, right, which is in a dojo, and so we have the concept of dojos now.
The place to make mistakes.
Correct, right? The place where you go test yourself against your peers, the place where you get critical real-time feedback. Unless you're doing that and that is integrated into your learning and development strategy, you're doing nothing other than giving your people information.
Mate, I love that. I think it's fantastic. So, and it sort of reminded me as you were talking about don't fear the man who knows 10,000 kicks. Yeah, fear the man who's done one kick 10,000 times. And, in my martial arts journey, it's, where it took years and years to even get the first belt. And, I don't know how many tens of thousands of back fists I've done, but, it's, and I just know that I'm not, because I've not done it for a lot of, a few years now. I know that I'm not as sharp. I've got the knowledge. I know the forms in my head. I could probably do one, or two or six or however many there are in my head. But without that constant and never-ending improvement and repetition, it's just it's a depreciating asset.
Yeah, it's entropic, right? You start losing the skill, the complexity, the day you stop practicing it. It's easy. Because that's human biology. It's the minute you stop using those pathways, the brain goes, well, I don't need to put energy to maintaining these pathways anymore. I start breaking them apart. Right? Conservation
of energy, yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
Right. So
perfect.
So we have that philosophy baked in. So come back to, we started this with the front to back office conversation, right?
Yes.
This method is applied across our whole business, across every function of our business, and how we develop people, using a structure and just enough structure and discipline, right, in order to really unlock best practice. And
so how do you find time to do this, mate? I mean, there's so many small businesses out there that, and mine included. We're just busy serving clients and getting stuff done.
You have to make it's a non-negotiable, right?
Like,
So
is it a day? Is it like a couple of hours a week? Is it a day?
yeah,
What sort of?
well, we in our model, in our revenue model and budgeting model,
Yep.
we budget for time for people to apply themselves to these things. Because if you
Really?
don't do that, yeah, you have to, right? If you don't do that, you're ultimately gonna fail. You're gonna at some point something's gonna break, and you're gonna keep experiencing those same breaks just over time, and you're never gonna really progress, right? So you simply have to do it. I think it's a non-negotiable, right? And if you can't make your P&L work, then you got another problem, right? Because it should, right? And it's not for this, virtue signaling 20% time and all this fancy shit, no, it's because...
Which we know really, actually, when you dig underneath the surface, that does never actually went into place and never actually works.
Yeah, I don't know, but for us, we do bake a threshold. And by the way, my people all know, and while it's an unpopular thing to say as a CEO, right? For me, learning doesn't stop at 5:30, right?
Mm.
Right? And, whilst I can't expect my people, right, to continue those learning journeys beyond the workday, right? I know that the ones who are most successful in life, not in my business, but in life, are the ones that tell me stories about how they were doing this on their walk in the morning, or how they did this with their kids. We have family units coming into some of our learning experiences. And I'm saying the kids come in, the mum or the dad who doesn't work in the company, we have breathing, movement exercise breaks. We have things which are facilitated where the whole family is on the Zoom or in the session, right?
Wow.
And that's where I know we're making a real difference, making a difference to the family unit, not just the person who happens to work, right? So, yeah, we take that stuff really seriously. And then that same philosophy also extends out to our systems and our governance processes. So, again, right, like systems have to be agile and adaptable, and the methods that you place for continual evolution of your systems, right, has to allow for just that. It has to be continual evolution, because you fix something today, or you tweak something today and you grow tomorrow, guarantee you're going to have to come back and revisit. And you have to have a flexible DevOps, SecOps, security ops, like frameworks that allow for the continual evolution of your digital platforms, and then your governance framework that sits around that. And this is where a lot of companies today, I think, hit the wall, is most governance comes down to the person who just happens to have the title, who just makes the decision, right? And it's linear. It rolls up to titles, right? The bigger the decision, the higher the title, decision made flows down, right? That's going to break. And I think we're now entering a period of technological evolution with AI and Gen AI and the next quantum leap of AI, where AI is going to break your business faster than you can keep up, right? It's going to surface problems. It's going to change customer expectations. And if you don't have a decentralized governance framework that allows your business to make changes in flight at the edges of the company, you're going to fail, right? Or you're going to hit a wall of growth, and it's going to be hard. And this is where I look at the days of the enterprise transformation, right? So this is my thing. It's my view.
Go for it. Yeah, I love it. I love this. This is great.
But I think the days of the corporate transformation are dead, because transformation means you've done two things wrong. You've accumulated a bunch of systems debt, technology debt, and process and organizational debt. So because you've been responsive, right, to market demands, you might have spun up a business unit quickly over here that's working outside the confines of your organizational processes because they're too hard to change, right? So hey, let's do it separately over here. And then you've got another one over there and another one over there. And all of a sudden, the process debt, the business debt, and the technology debt gets so big that it starts to bring your business to a halt. Then what do? I've got to go through a transformation, right? And as you know, transformations of this nature are very linear and waterfall in nature. By the time you deliver it, business has moved on. Yeah?
It's all changed, yeah. And it's expensive.
Correct. Versus what we are kind of, promoting and espousing, which is agile transformation is something that happens every day, every week, every month. And your governance has to support that kind of decision making. Your systems have to support that kind of technological innovation. And your culture has to support that kind of way of being. And you know what? I can, at 100 people, I can say it took us years of change management to get to this point. But I've seen, and to my own surprise, right? I've seen some major companies. I had a chat with a lady. She's from a pharmaceutical organization, a large global pharmaceutical, who I was astonished to see how far they had come down. Now they essentially built their own governance model. They worked at Boston Consulting for a few years, and they rolled their own. Now they're very independent with that, but they've done an amazing. They've scaled that globally, and it exists with their regulatory side of their business. They call it their manufacturing side, right? That builds products, which is lean. So it uses Lean Six Sigma for linear, but it's still about improvement. But the two things coexist, agile and lean, in their organization coexist very well. And so I was really quite enthusiastic to see someone of that scale do this. And I think that's it, man. Like, that's the way of the future. If you're not doing it, if you're not on the pathway to that, you're behind the 8 ball.
So how do you manage, I got 2 questions. So how do you manage a hybrid environment with trying to develop and drive that team culture? Do you do it through positioning statements and North Star conversations and cultural conversations? So just how do you do that in an environment that is 2024?
Mate, it's narrative's very important, like being clear on your values, being clear. But like we buy into this notion of divergent culture. So it's a very different, when most people talk culture, right? They talk, and when you scratch the surface, and you've seen this with large software companies, like there's that type of person and they're all the same,
Yep.
When they talk diversity, they're more talking about gender diversity, ethnicity diversity. But when we talk about diversity, I'm saying no. I'm talking about like true diversity, where me and you, we totally disagree, and that's a good thing. Because that creates tension, and it's in the tension, right? That the real brilliance is, and so. We have a culture that really encourages that kind of tension. And again, how do you do that? So your culture, as you add new people, it's constantly changing. But what doesn't change is the core values that you measure yourself against. And so we've got ours, and we go, right, as long as you're living into the core values, I don't care what you believe. I don't care where you come from, what gender you are, what your background. As long as you live into this stuff, and that's the exclusive part. It's not inclusive. Anyone who says things are all inclusive, no, actually they're not, because by definition, right? If you're not going to conform to at least the core values of this business, then this is not the place for you. Somewhere else will be the place for you, right? And I don't think that's a popular statement. People like to use inclusivity as a rhetoric these days, where I'm actually no, we are exclusive, right? Because you have to buy. It's kind of like, the best metaphor I can give you is a Premier League soccer team. Yeah?
Yep.
They're not inclusive by no means, right?
No.
Right? You got a job to do. If you want to play Premier League soccer, this is the expectation. We're exclusive to that. Now, I don't care where you come from, what language you speak, but if you don't buy into this way of being, you're not in this club, right? Simple as that. High performance culture has a benchmark, has expectations, and provided you're willing to sign up to those, the rest is inclusive, the rest is diverse, and and the rest doesn't matter, right? But there are certain things you have to are the non-negotiables, and that's where your culture then evolves from, right? What are those non-negotiables?
So where does a small business start? Let's say we've got somebody who's in front of you who's at 5 people, 10 people. It's all remote work. Step one.
So step one, and I don't think this can be done like this. Has to be as a founder team. What are your non-negotiables? And get them distinct. There should be no, like, not 10 statements, right? Like, we have 3, right? 3. We before me, which means I don't care who you are, you're not bigger than a team. So if you want to be a lone wolf or a big star, this is not the place for you, yeah? Because the team's always going to outperform any individual, right? We have commitment to service excellence, which means that service excellence being, a true commitment to delivering wow to our customer, So if you don't hold that outcome to the client to the highest degree, yeah, forget it, man. Like this, I don't care about excuses. I don't care about, the client didn't do this. No, like we can say no to clients as well, right? So, and we do, right? Because if the client doesn't buy into some of these values, then they're the wrong client for us, right? And if we learn down the track, we might get this project delivered, but you know what? We're out after that, right? But that service excellence is a really important value. And then pursuit of mastery. And this is a really important one. Again, it's a non-negotiable, right? And how does it manifest? Well, it manifests in all those other things I told you about. You're committing time to learning. You're committing time to failing and being transparent about your failure. You're committing yourself to the vulnerability it takes, right, to fail and have the conversation about that failure, so you're open to the constructive feedback. Because if you think you're above that, I don't care who you are, this is not the place for you, right? And I can tell you now, where we have gotten soft on one of those values because someone was senior or
a superstar,
right? It's bitten us on the ass, and we'll never do it again. So they're the 3 things, and that's what we measure against, right? So we've had people struggle, but they have lived into those values, and we have worked with them, and they have become rock stars, right? But if someone doesn't want to live into that, then the demands we put on them, it's going to create unnecessary friction. And so they're best off not being here, And so I think as a founder, yours could be, whatever. We want to embrace a lifestyle of work. And what I mean by that is, we want to embrace a kind of workplace that supports flexible lifestyle. That's one of our core values. Cool. There you go. That's going to automatically set the stage for the kind of people that are going to want to work for you. You know what I mean? And the kind of people that won't do well in your organization, right? So whatever kind of business that you're trying to manifest and you're trying to create as a place, the feeling, it's got to be very much a feeling of, it sets the feeling tone of your business. Be clear on that. Have them clearly articulated, and not something you just put on some slideware and forget about it.
Frame it in the lobby where it's got dust all over it.
It's integrated into how you remunerate, how you hire, how you fire, in every performance conversation. It's got to be embedded into all your conversations and all your processes.
Frank, I absolutely love that. I've learned. I've really enjoyed this conversation today. I really appreciate it. So, is there anything you want to? I'll wrap it up in a second. But is there anything anything else you want to share about your journey, where you think that people who are in the software and tech space need to know?
Oh, look, mate. It's interesting. We covered a really broad stack of conversations.
No, I love it.
Look, for me, previous success doesn't guarantee future success, right? I mean, I've come off successes straight into big failures, and and I know we talk about embrace failure, right?
It sucks,
and and one of the in our adaptive human academy, we have a belt system, right? And the difference between a brown belt and a black belt is actually a proven successful failure. And so what I mean by that is this: if you haven't taken on a project that's absolutely kicked your ass, where you have failed, and I don't mean, right, it's just cost you, reputational. No, I mean you've lost money. You've lost something, right? It's cost you, and you haven't earned your black belt, because what you haven't proven is how can you get back up, right, off the canvas and pick yourself up and get on with it the next day, right? Like nothing happened. Because if you can't prove that, right, you're not a black belt yet, and for me, like, I've put myself in situations to have my ass kicked in business many times because, I want to see, can I get back up, right? Now, it's not necessarily a good thing. You don't want to go out to fail, but what I'm saying is you shouldn't be defined by your failures. And because you're the same person you were on the win as you were with the failure, right? It's just sometimes the outcome is not going to be expected. And what's more important is what you do after you don't get the expected outcome you want. And that's the life of an entrepreneur, And so I think you got to be really good at not being defined by any experience at any one point in time, because life's a long trajectory, mate, and you might have smashed it out of the ballpark today, but so what, mate? Humble yourself, because tomorrow something's going to kick your ass. And if it's not, you're not trying hard enough.
What a great way to finish. Thank you so much, Frank. That is amazing. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I want to have more conversations like this. I want to know about this black belt situation. I actually tried to put something like that into the business a little while ago, but this is years and years ago when I had about 70 people working for me. So certainly never as big as what you're talking about, but what an inspirational conversation. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt. Nice talking to you.
Bye for now. Man, that was excellent. Fucking hell. I felt like I should feel like I should pay you for that conversation. That's great.
Yeah, so cut it up as you need to, Matt, or, whatever you need to do to edit. That was good. It was actually, covered some interesting ground I didn't expect, but that was, I hope your listeners find it useful.
Well, look, it's just, it serves a number of purposes, right? So I want to obviously deliver value.
You want to hit stop on the record?
Yeah, I'll hit stop. Editors don't need to hear this.